All right, welcome everyone to this deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that's been making headlines, a lot of buzz around this. Elon Musk's, kind of surprising move from Silicon Valley to the world of government in Washington.
It is pretty wild, right?
Yeah, it is. It's like, I remember those old time, like 19th century railroad tycoons, the guys who had all that power over the government.
Oh, yeah, those robber barons.
Exactly. It feels like we're watching a 21st century version of that, with these tech giants like Musk stepping into these roles. It gets kind of blurry, the lines between business and public service.
Yeah, definitely.
And specifically, we're focusing on Musk's new job, the head honcho of the Department of Government Efficiency, or as they call it, DOGE.
Catchy, right?
Oh, yeah, very catchy. But the big question here is this whole thing a conflict of interest waiting to happen?
Big question, yeah.
We've got a ton of articles, reports, opinions, all that stuff to dig through. You ready to jump in?
Absolutely, let's get our hands dirty.
All right. So what's really interesting to me is that it's not just about what Musk's doing, right? It's like a bigger trend. This whole tech industry influence on the government, it's growing.
Right, I mean, think about it. Back in the day, when the internet was new, these tech companies, they were the rebels, right?
The disruptors, yeah.
Yeah, shaking things up. But now, they're the establishment. They've got so much power, economic and political.
Yeah, definitely a shift. So for anyone who hasn't been following every little detail, can you break down what Musk actually does in DOGE and why everyone's raising eyebrows?
Sure. So DOGE, it's brand new, this department, and honestly, it feels kind of tailor-made for Musk. He's got a lot of control over government policies, and more importantly, the budget, right? Billions of taxpayer dollars.
Ah, so that's where the potential problem is, right?
Yeah, I mean, just the idea that those funds could go towards his companies, maybe instead of other important things, that's worrying.
So the conflict of interest, it's not just a theory. There are real ways it could happen.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the first things they did under DOGE was dismantle a bunch of government agencies. And guess what? Those agencies were actually investigating Musk's companies.
Whoa, hold on, really?
Yeah, people started comparing it right away to that regulatory capture thing. Where industries basically manipulate the government to help themselves, not the public.
Hold up, regulatory capture. You gotta break that down for us regular folks. What does that even mean?
Okay, imagine a watchdog, right? It's supposed to bark if a company's doing something bad. But the company, they managed to put a muzzle on that watchdog.
Okay, I get it.
Basically, the industry's being regulated, they gain control over the regulators. It's a classic move. Like, remember the savings and loan crisis back in the 80s?
Vaguely.
Well, they deregulated things, and the industry itself pushed for that. Led to a lot of fraud, a huge mess. Taxpayers had to bail them out.
Oof. That's not a good precedent.
Right. And it makes you wonder, are we seeing the same kind of thing now with DOGE and Musk's companies?
Yeah, that's a big question.
And all this is happening while there are multiple federal investigations looking into those companies. Like Congressman Adam Schiff said there's at least 20 of them.
20? Wow, that's a lot.
Right. It's everything from concerns about Tesla's autopilot, that whole AI system that's still being developed, to accusations of animal welfare violations at Neuralink, his brain-computer company.
Okay, so let's get specific for a sec. The Starlink situation in Ukraine, that's got to be a prime example here, right? Can you walk us through that one?
Absolutely. So back in 2022, USAID helped get all these Starlink terminals over to Ukraine, giving them internet access during the war. Super important. But there's this question about Musk's personal stake in all this, right? He owns Starlink through SpaceX.
Right, so he's profiting from this aid. And didn't USAID's own, internal watchdog start an investigation into how they handled the whole Starlink thing?
Yeah, exactly. Their Inspector General, Paul K. Martin, he confirmed it to Congress. They're looking into whether there were any oversights or, conflicts of interest. But here's the thing. With all the sounders under DHE, those agencies that are supposed to be doing the investigating, they're kind of under Musk's control now.
It's like the fox guarding the henhouse, right?
That's a good way to put it. Definitely raises questions about, whether those investigations can really happen without interference. And it's not just Starlink. We've got Tesla, too. That company's worth over $1 trillion. It's huge in the electric car market.
Yeah, Tesla's a behemoth. But what are they being investigated for, exactly?
Well, there's a bunch of inquiries, everything from autopilot safety. There have been some pretty bad accidents linked to that, to design flaws that have led to crashes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, they're especially worried about the limits of the AI in autopilot right now and how that might be affecting, safety on the roads.
It's scary to think that the head of a company being investigated like that now has a say in the agencies doing the investigating. I can see why people are worried.
For sure. And it doesn't stop there. We need to talk about Neuralink, too. That's probably the most ethically tricky of all Musk's ventures, I'd say.
Neuralink, right. That's the whole brain-computer interface thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I first heard about it, my mind was blown. Sounds like a piece of sci-fi, but the implications, that's all real-world stuff. What's the latest there?
Well, they've been getting a lot of heat for how they're doing their animal testing. Both the FDA and the USDA are looking into it. But the big story came out from Reuters. They reported that around 1,500 animals, monkeys, pigs, sheep, died during testing at Neuralink over 4 years.
1,500 deaths. That's a lot.
It is. This is way beyond the usual debate about animal testing and medical research. It's a huge ethical question, especially because we're talking about tech that could change human consciousness. And again, with Musk running DOGE, it's hard not to wonder if those investigations will really be thorough and independent.
So much to think about here, and we're just getting started. We've laid out the basics, but there's so much more to dig into. Next time, we'll go deeper into the ethical stuff with Neuralink, look at the technical side of the autopilot controversy, and explore how tech has influenced government in the past. Stick with us. Okay, we're back and ready to go even deeper into this whole Elon Musk and DOGE thing. It's like we're living in an episode of Black Mirror, right?
Yeah, some serious parallels there, especially when you think about Neuralink and what they're trying to do. Brain-computer interfaces. That was sci-fi stuff. Now it's becoming real.
Right. And like with any powerful tech, there are ethical questions we got to think about. Can't just ignore that stuff.
Absolutely.
So Neuralink, we talked about the animal testing before the break, but what exactly are the ethical issues here? It feels like we're in totally uncharted territory with the science and the ethics.
Yeah, we are. The potential benefits of what Neuralink is doing, they're huge. Imagine being able to help paralyzed people move again, or treating diseases like Alzheimer's. Even enacting how our brains work, that's on the table.
It's mind-blowing, but
But there's a cost, right? All those animal deaths during testing, that's a serious red flag. We have to ask, are the results worth it? What protections are there to make sure those animals aren't suffering needlessly?
I was reading about the procedures they're doing. It's not just like giving them a pill, they're putting chips in their brains. That's so invasive.
Right. And the ethical worries don't stop there. What about when they start testing on humans? This is tech that could change how we think, how we feel, our sense of self even. How do you even get informed consent for something like that when we don't know the full consequences?
It feels like we're barely scratching the surface of these questions, and the tech's already moving so fast.
That's the problem. Tech moves way faster than our ability to figure out the ethics and the rules. And with this whole conflict of interest thing, it gets even more complicated. If the guy in charge of the government also stands to make money from this tech, how do we know he's putting public safety and ethics first?
Right, it all comes back to that. And that brings us to autopilot and Tesla. Same tension there, pushing the limits, but also needing to keep people safe. Can you talk about the technical side of the concerns there?
Sure. So autopilot, it uses what's called a neural network. It's a type of AI that learns from tons of data. The idea is eventually it'll drive better than any human. But right now, these systems are still being developed. They have weaknesses. They can get tricked by unexpected things, bad weather, even just the lines on the road.
So it's not a question of if they'll make mistakes, it's when. And when a mistake happens in a car going fast, that's dangerous.
Exactly. NHTSA, they're investigating whether autopilot's being used too much, too soon, without enough safety measures. It's an ethical question. Is Tesla putting progress ahead of people's lives?
It feels like this is a microcosm of a bigger problem. How do we deal with tech changing so fast? How do we balance innovation with responsibility? How do we make sure technology is serving us, not the other way around?
That's it. That's the core issue. And looking back at history helps. Tobacco, fossil fuels, those industries. At first, they downplayed the risks. They used their power to fight regulations.
Right, we've seen this before.
The difference now is technology is evolving so much faster. The potential consequences, good and bad, they're way bigger.
It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest, but we got to stay informed, right? The more we know, the more we can demand accountability and create a future where technology is used ethically.
I agree completely. And we need to highlight not just the risks, but the things that allow these conflicts of interest to happen in the first place. How does power work? How can it be used to put profit over people? We need to understand that.
So let's talk about how that happens. Earlier, you mentioned regulatory capture. Can you explain that a bit more? How does that work in the real world?
It's like a revolving door between the government and industries. People with strong tie to an industry, they move back and forth between being regulators and working for the companies they're supposed to regulate.
So they go from watchdog to being part of the pack, basically.
Kind of, yeah, it blurs the lines. Regulators start thinking like the industry, maybe even put the industry's needs ahead of the public's.
So it's not necessarily like bribes and stuff. It's more about changing how you see things, what your priorities are.
Exactly. It's about relationships, shared beliefs, this idea that what's good for the industry is good for everyone. And sometimes, maybe it is, but sometimes it creates a dangerous imbalance.
And the firings at DOGE, is that an example of this happening?
It's definitely suspicious. You see experienced government people, experts in their fields, replaced with people who are closer to the industries being regulated. Makes you wonder if those new people will be as tough, as committed to keeping things safe and ethical.
Like, imagine replacing referees with players from one of the teams. Not exactly fair, right?
Exactly. That's the worry. The playing field's tilted now. It favors corporate interests, maybe at the expense of what's good for the public. And when those corporate interests are involved in tech that can literally reshape our world, the stakes are incredibly high.
This is heavy stuff, but it's important to talk about. If we don't, who will? Before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind. We've been talking about conflict of interest in a general way, but what about the people affected by all this, the human cost?
You're right. That's crucial. We can get lost in these discussions about power and technology, but real people are being impacted. Those firings at DOGE, that's a loss of experience and knowledge. That could have consequences for a long time.
It's not just numbers, it's people with families, careers who understand how the government works. Now their voices are gone, and that's a loss for everyone.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond the firings. Think about the people hurt in those autopilot accidents, the families who lost someone, the people whose lives have been disrupted by how Tesla does business. That's the real-world cost of unchecked power, a system that puts profit before people.
Yeah. It reminds us that this isn't just theoretical. These things have consequences for real people's lives, and it should make us want to fight for something better, a system that puts people first. We've covered a lot, and I'm sure there's more to discuss, but for now we'll take a break. Come back for our final thoughts on this whole situation. Welcome back for the last part of our deep dive into Elon Musk and DOGE. So we've talked about Neuralink, autopilot, and how tech's been messing with government forever. But the big question, the one hanging over all of this is, does Musk being in charge of DOGE, does that create a conflict of interest?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And honestly, after all we've discussed, there's no easy answer. It's not black and white. There's no, like, smoking gun, no proof that he's doing anything illegal. But there's this feeling, this unease. Like, are public service and private gain, are those lines getting too blurry?
Yeah, totally. It's like this fog over everything. You can't see clearly. We got these 20 investigations, agencies that were looking into Musk's companies getting dismantled, government people getting fired left and right, and Musk himself, he's always pushing the limits. It's all a bit much, honestly.
It makes you skeptical, that's for sure. This situation, it needs to be watched closely. We can't just assume everything's fine, especially with the potential consequences being so huge. This isn't just about money. We're talking about technologies that could change our lives, our society, even what it means to be human.
It's like we're at a crossroads. One path, maybe we get amazing breakthroughs in medicine, transportation, all that. But the other path, that's unchecked power, ethical disasters, a future where tech only benefits a few, not everyone.
And how do we choose the right path? How do we make sure the future is better for all of us, not just a select few? That's the challenge, right? It needs people to be informed, the press to be watching closely, and a system that actually holds those in power accountable.
Okay, so let's talk solutions. If there is a conflict of interest here, what can we do about it? How do we protect the public interest? It feels like a huge task, citizens and watchdogs against these giant tech companies.
It's tough, no doubt, but not impossible. First, we got to make the systems we have for oversight and accountability stronger. Give agencies like the NHTSA, FDA, USDA, the ones we talked about, give them more resources and more independence.
Right, like give those watchdogs sharper teeth. But it's not enough just to have the tools to investigate. You got to be willing to use them, right?
Absolutely. We need leaders who actually care about public safety and ethics, who ask the hard questions and hold powerful people responsible, even if it's uncomfortable.
Like that saying, sunlight's the best disinfectant. The more transparent things are, the harder it is to hide shady stuff. But transparency alone, that's not enough. There have to be consequences if someone breaks the law or does something unethical, real penalties so they think twice about doing it again.
100%. If there's no punishment, people will keep doing bad things. We need a system that holds everyone accountable, rich or poor, famous or not.
Stronger regulations, more transparency, real consequences. Good steps. But what about us, regular people? Is there anything we can do to push for change?
Oh, definitely. Staying informed and engaged. That's huge. Don't just read headlines, do your own research, ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge things. Support groups that are fighting for more transparency in the government and the tech industry.
And speak up. Contact your representatives. Write letters to the editor. Talk about it online. Make your voice heard. Even small things can make a difference when enough people do them.
That's so important. In the end, it's about taking back our power as citizens. We've gotten used to feeling helpless against these giant corporations and systems, but we have more power than we think. If we demand better, hold our leaders accountable, and refuse to accept a future where tech just makes a few people richer and more powerful, we can change things.
It's a call to action then, right? This isn't just about Musk or DOGE. It's about the kind of world we want. It's about taking control, demanding transparency, and making sure technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And this isn't the end of the conversation, it's just the start. We have to keep asking questions, keep pushing for change, and keep believing in a better future.
That's a great place to leave it. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, maybe even a little inspiring. Remember, the future isn't set in stone. It's something we build together. So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep fighting the good fight.